In this episode, I'm going to give 3 examples of random encounters using a battle map that I created in the last episode. And these examples came from suggestions by a viewer, Lauge Christofferson, based on the terrain and storylines that I had developed, how the group of player characters came to this particular spot. And as we'll see, the battle tactics that these creatures used are based obviously on their statistics, their combat abilities, their intelligence, but also their relationship to this environment, whether or not they're just wandering by or whether they make this their permanent home. And of course, encounters reflect the game mechanics of experience. Players want to fight battles to gain experience, to find treasure. They want to advance in levels, and this is the most common form to do that. But as a GM, I love to use random encounters to introduce new storylines or to illuminate ones already in play. And there's also that issue of the number of encounters per day. How do you make encounters fun, deadly? You don't want to overwhelm the players, but you do want to always take them right to the edge. Hello again, folks. KR King here with my YouTube channel, helping one and all homebrew their own D&D campaign. So in the last episode, I asked for some input at the end from you, the viewer, in regards to creating some encounters for a party of 5 third-level characters. And a longtime viewer and subscriber, Lauge Christofferson, offered up a whole host of examples. The reason I did this was to try to approach these encounters creatively. I found when you have input from outsiders, it can allow you to think in different ways. They say, well, what about this? And then you've got to come up with something. And this can be really useful in terms of not getting stuck in the patterns. We all tend to do things the same way. Lauge suggested a rust monster that's been living off the ferrous materials in the hills. He also talked about animals such as a lion or saber-toothed tiger. He mentioned the idea of swarms. He likes the fact that the swarms can get right in the hex with the players. And he suggested perhaps there might be a combination of these things, that the players run into the swarm and then some creature comes along or is working in concert with the swarm. And then finally, he suggested something, and he said in his comments, hey, this is going to be a little too deadly probably for a party of 5 third-level characters, but he suggested an umber hulk. And I love umber hulks. They're a legacy monster from the very first edition. But they're pretty deadly, and I'll talk about that in this video. So I'm going to use 3 of these ideas that Lauge suggested to illuminate both, the in-game tactical aspects of creating an encounter like this, but also the metagame aspects of, what you're trying to do in terms of advancing your storylines, keeping the things fun, not overwhelming your players, avoiding a complete party kill. All right, so here is the battle map that I created in the Barren Hills, in which the player characters are going in 10 miles to throw off anyone that might be following. Their plan is to turn back around and go to Rodenburr and hide out and wait for these attacks. I'm also going to show here the sample party that I am using. It's based on a party I've run with online. So we have Nolan the Paladin, who has chosen the Oath of Devotion. He has a defensive fighting style, so he's got a really nice AC. Hoodin the Wizard, and he is of the School of Illusion. It's a character that took kind of an idiosyncratic view of being a wizard. So at this point at 3rd level, his only real combat, he's got Chill Touch. He's also got Magic Missile. Then you have Eldrith, who is an elven cleric of the War Domain. So obviously he's got healing spells as a cleric, but also he's a frontline fighter alongside Nolan. Then there's Barren the Ranger. His favored terrain is grassland, so it's not going to work too well in the Barren Hills. He does have his longbow capabilities. And finally you have Althenor, the half-elf bard. He's a typical jack of all trades. He's got some heal spells. He's also got, some offensive, a sleep and a thunder wave. So the players are going to be moving along this path when they have this encounter, either before or after they see this pond or around the pond. Again, that's your choice. And the how and why of the encounter depends on the creature. How does it interact with its world? Does it live here? Is it searching for food? Is it protecting its territory? Or is it truly just wandering by? You got to be careful that you don't throw a creature with too high of a challenge rating at the players at their appropriate level, because then you're going to get what I called in an earlier video the deadly plus encounter, where one or more or possibly all of the player characters are risking death. And I'm going to use Lauge's suggestion, which again he said was a little heavy, of the umber hulk. because this is truly a deadly plus encounter as defined in my earlier video. Let's say our party is walking along the path here, and you can see they come around here, and there's the Umber Hulk. And right at that moment, we have 3 player characters that can see the Umber Hulk. And a point of order here, when I'm moving tokens in Fantasy Grounds, if the players are going to say they're maintaining a marching order, they're in a group, even if one player moves first and sees, the Umber Hulk, I'm going to say that they were all moving together, and we're going to move those tokens up to where they would be at that moment that they see the Umber Hulk. And this is important because the Umber Hulk does have a really nice armor class of 18. It's also got 3 attacks, mandibles and 2 claws that do nice damage. But more importantly, it has the confusing gaze feature. Any creature within 30 feet that looks at the Umber Hulk's eyes must make a DC 15 saving throw or be confused. And that confusion results in a D8 die roll. 1 through 4, the target does nothing. 5 and 6, it runs away in a direction, and 7 and 8, it attacks the nearest creature to it, which tends to be a party member. And while the effect only lasts 1 turn, you have to make that saving throw each turn that you look at the Umber Hulk. It isn't like, oh, you made the save and you have 24 hours or an hour. No. Every time you look. Now, you can try to attack the Umber Hulk without looking at it, but then you're at disadvantage in your attack. And the thing about a charisma save is that's one of those characteristics that's often a stat dump, for characters if you're using a buy system or whatever. Now, in this particular group, we have a paladin and a bard with high charisma rolls, but some of the other characters have lower charisma, and so it's going to make them more prone to blowing that save. So your question is, if the players can make some saves, can they back away and get outside that 30-foot perimeter, keep backing away and use spell and ranged attacks to whittle down the Umber Hulk? So the cleric could do a whole series of guided bolt attacks, which do 46, but he's got to hit the target, so he needs a 14 to hit. And the wizard's magic missiles are going to always hit, but they don't do very much damage on a creature with this many hit points. The bard has to get within 15 feet to use his Thunder Wave. Otherwise, he has things like Vicious Mockery or something like that. Again, not that effective against a creature with this many hit points. The other problem with this is that it assumes that the Umber Hulk is just going to go along with this strategy. The player's backing away and peppering it with ranged attacks. But I don't think so, because the way to make your world interesting is when you have creatures act in such a way that would be to their advantage. They're hunting for things and whatever. And if you look at the monster manual, the Umber Hulk, underground, it sits beside walls, it burrows along, and listens for vibrations and then bursts out on its enemies. Now here we have an outdoor situation, but again, you have these cliff faces along here. The Umber Hulk could wait inside a cliff face and burst out. It can also go underground and burst up from underneath the players. And if it did such a thing, rush out at them or underneath them, that means that all the players are going to have to make that initial confusion save. And even if everyone makes the save such that they could, in theory, disengage and try to get away, one player is going to be engaged. The Umber Hulk, in theory, can move the same rate of speed. So you've got issues there. And if it's a character such as the, wizard, maybe even, the ranger or bard with the worst AC, those mandibles and those claws can do some heavy damage. And let's say the players do manage to get everybody back. They're making ranged attacks. They're whittling down the Umber Hulk. What's to say that it doesn't, it's not just going to stand there. It's going to react to this. It could go down under the ground, either to get away or to stalk the players. It only goes 20 feet per turn underground, but it could fool the players and burst up again. Otherwise, they've got to run away and run all the way around. Again, they didn't defeat the creature. They escaped with their lives. Not a very satisfying encounter. Now, you could nerf the Umber Hulk statistics a little bit. You could say, oh, it's an adolescent Umber Hulk. So its confusion is a DC 10. Or its mandible claw attacks do a third less. And that might make it, a little less deadly. But, of course, then there's also an element of, well, then why are you running an Umber Hulk anyway? Why not just run something which is a little more interesting and you're not clearly having to lessen it? All right, so another idea that Lauge had was the swarm creature. And he said in here specifically that he liked the idea that the swarm creatures can go into the same hex. And I'm going to add a little twist to this. I'm going to have a swarm of beetles. And the reason I'm doing this is because they have the burrowing capability that I'm thinking that they, lie low under the path, waiting for something to come by. Then they burst up. And in this way, they're in the same hex, and in theory, they could be under, 1, 2, or all of the PCs. They're using this burrowing capability to hunt. They're interacting with their environment. So you're looking at a half of a challenge rating for each swarm. Even if I do 1 for each party member, that's only 500 XP. It's not even a medium encounter, really. But with this hunting tactic, every member of the party is engaged. They have to deal with this. There is going to be some resource drain here. Swarms can't be charmed, so they can't be slept. So that takes away a pretty powerful spell of the bard's. His thunder wave, if he's engaged, he centers it on himself. There's a potential here in this 15-foot area to affect other player characters. So again, you're using their tactics, you're limiting a little bit of their spell capabilities. Again, if they try to use their movement to get away, because the beetles only move 20 feet a turn, the beetles could go back underground just like the umber hulk. And the thing about this is the characters are going to potentially take some damage. The paladin and the cleric have a pretty high armor class. The swarm only has a +3 to hit. But certainly the other characters, and they're all going to be engaged, and even the higher level ones, with each swarm having an average hit points of 22, they're not going to kill it on one strike. So they're going to have some chances. Again, if they blow their perception checks or they could be surprised, there's going to be a chance to do a little bit of damage, force a little heals, a little resource drain. And then there's the combination thing that Lauge talked about. And there's a couple ways you could do this with this swarm attack. We don't think of a storyline really with a swarm because they're a collection of unintelligent creatures. But they're always described as unnatural. A druid cannot charm a swarm, unlike other, animals. And so for that reason, we think of swarms as indicators of other, deadlier creatures that are nearby. The swarm of bats is a classic thing for vampires. Now, vampires are obviously too deadly for this party. But I picked the beetles not only because of their burrowing capability to come underneath, but if there are scarab beetles, what do we associate them with? Mummies. Now, Mummy Lord, no, way too powerful. It's going to just have to be, 1 mummy CR3. Again, got the bludgeoning, got the necrotic damage, has a chance for the rotting thing, and it has the mummy's gaze, which frightens creatures. So if you're going to do a combination like this, do you do it at the same time or do you do it staggered? And there's a number of options here with a mummy. And of course, a mummy also gives you an opportunity for a storyline, but we'll get to that. Now, with a mummy, obviously, you're probably going to want to have a mummy's tomb, which you might have to draw up if you're deciding this, but you can do this pretty quickly. In fact, I can do an example right here. All right, so I'm going to go into Dungeon Draft. I'm going to use this 40-inch size. I'm just going to try to do as quick as I can to show you down and dirty how you can, make this tomb very quickly. So I'm just going to make a round tomb. This is going to be buried. There'll be an entrance from the top. And I just lay that out. I'm going to have some stalactites. So you just kind of go like this. Get those in place there. Let go of the mouse. And there you go. Maybe that's a few. Get rid of that one right there. All right. And then I'm just going to add a sarcophagus. No, not a corpse, a sarcophagus. There we go. Now you're going to think maybe that's where the mummy is, but I think maybe actually I'm going to be a little trickier on this. Now notice all the cover and everything in here in terms of these stalactites for a bat. And then I'm going to export that. Mummy. Get that right. PNG file. And then I can come into my fantasy grounds. And I go import image here. There we go. Import. Where is that? Oh, it's PNG. Mummy. All right, and there's our file. All I have to do in order to move tokens around is to set the grid. Zoom up on that. All right, there we go. Right there, a little adjusting. And there we go. Got it. So the next question is, this combination attack, is the mummy going to come up with the swarm, slightly after the swarm, or once the swarm is finished? Or is it going to stay in its tomb and the players would have to discover this? The swarm comes up and it reveals a hole in the ground or something. This is a long buried tomb that, maybe a rock slide or some earthquake movements or whatever have revealed. Now, even though this swarm seems to be kind of just an annoyance encounter, the players could use some spells. The cleric could use one or more guided bolts. The wizard could use, one or more magic missiles. The paladin might use his searing smite to, just to get rid of these things. And then this mummy pops up, right? Potentially right underneath them, or however it works. Now, the thing is, the mummy only moves 20 feet a turn. So here again, unless it engages someone, hits them right away, they could disengage, try to do some ranged attacks on it or whatever. But you don't have to have the mummy battle right away. If the players discover this tomb and they go down in, it's a chute that goes down and they go down into the tomb, now the mummy has them in a smaller space. And you don't have to have the mummy right in the sarcophagus. This could be the burial chamber of the high priestess, long since forgotten. And her loyal servant is there mummified and he's behind, this pillar here or whatever. The players come down, boom, we have an attack. Now we're in an enclosed area. Now that movement rate issue isn't such a big problem. So that even if the players discover the hole, decide to take a full rest, buff themselves up in that enclosed space with the mummy, they're going to have a little battle there going on. And the nice thing about a tomb, as always, it has a storyline, potential treasure. You can link it to other things. And another combination of battle you can do with a swarm is just the creatures that hear this battle. The players are going to make noise when they're fighting these beetles, right? Something may overhear them. Lauge suggested an animal encounter. He said lion or saber-toothed tiger. And the lion is an interesting one because they have pack tactics, right? A pride of lions attacks. They get advantages within 5 feet of their allies. They also have this pounce ability where they can knock a target down. They get an extra bite advantage attack. Again, these cliff faces, they're hiding on the cliffs. They're waiting for this swarm battle to occur. The players finish them off. The lions have tremendous stealth. They attack. So again, thank you, Lauge, for those suggestions. And this map, I barely scratched the surface of this encounter map. I didn't have time to do the mesa for flying attacks. Maybe in the future, some other areas on here. But you can see how much you can get out of this, the ideas you can get to make encounters that are going to stretch the players to the limit, but not necessarily wipe them out. Hey, if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel. I'm always looking for more subscribers. Leave some comments. I love to hear and talk to my viewers. And in the meantime, keep playing D&D, my friends, and tell somebody else about it.